There are no prayers in the void, only echoes and the hum of something vast and hateful turning beneath the skin of reality. When the rift tore open, it did not blaze with light. It screamed, a wound of time and madness, coiling like a serpent of molten glass, splitting the weave of space. And through it fell a shape that should not belong, a man forged in fury, armored in the memory of a dead civilization, carrying in his chest the silence of unending rage. He did not remember how it began, only the fall. The pressure crushed his lungs, though he had long ceased to need air. Flames licked around him, green, purple, colors unnamed, warp fire. It did not burn matter, it burned meaning. It sought to unmake what it touched, to whisper madness into every molecule. Yet the Doomslayer did not break. He had broken long ago, and what remained was something that even the warp could not digest. When he struck ground, the planet groaned beneath him. Ash billowed, skeletal forests trembled. He rose slowly, dust sliding from his armor in lazy trails of smoke. The air smelled of iron and incense, the scent of death made holy. Above him, the sky was torn open, bleeding auroras of warp energy across the stratosphere. Lightning arced sideways, painting the horizon with veins of sickly gold. He looked around. The land stretched endless, a wasteland of burnt cathedrals and shattered tanks. The banners of the Imperium fluttered on broken spires, their aquila symbols crusted with centuries of grime. He had fallen into a graveyard of empires. A whisper brushed against the inside of his skull. "You should not be here." The voice was not one, it was thousands, murmuring in unison, the collective dread of the warp-given tongue. But the Slayer did not listen. He never had. His thoughts were hammer blows, simple, primal, absolute. Find, destroy, continue. He began to walk. Every step left a crater in the soil, every motion a defiance of this universe's laws. The gravity was heavier here, as if the very planet resented his existence. Clouds spiraled down toward him, drawn to his presence like carrion to rot. Somewhere in the distance, a bell tolled. Once, twice, endlessly, a funeral song for the living. He moved toward it. The terrain shifted as he went. Ruins became trenches. Trenches became fields of corpses half fused into the mud. Faces stared upward, twisted in eternal devotion and agony. He could not tell if they prayed to be saved or to be ended. A servitor crawled by on metal limbs, half human, half machine, chanting binary hymns to a dead god of logic. It saw him and froze, its ocular implants flaring with static, unidentified pattern. Anomaly. Unsanctioned presence. He crushed it beneath his boot before it could finish. There was no hate in the gesture. It was simply the motion of a storm passing through. Far beyond, the bell grew louder, and with it, voice, orders, gunfire. He emerged over a ridge and saw them, a regiment of the Imperial Guard, dug into the earth, their armor the color of dried blood, their faces hidden beneath rebreathers. They were human and terrified, not of the enemy of the sky itself. The warp storm churned overhead, birthing phantoms of light and shadow. And then they saw him. Contact. Unregistered entity approaching from Grid 7. By the throne, what is that? Dozens of rifles lifted, bolter shells roared. The Slayer kept walking. Explosions ripped the ridge, soil and shrapnel geysered into the air. Bolter rounds, the size of thumbs, tore into him. One struck the breastplate, cracked it, another embedded in his shoulder, burning through flesh. He did not slow. Smoke and fire wreathed his silhouette until he became an advancing ghost of molten iron. It's not stopping. Emperor, protect us. He leapt. The impact was thunder. Soldiers scattered, the ground fractured, a dozen men vanished beneath the shockwave. The Slayer landed amidst them, his gauntlet closing around one soldier's head, crushing it like wet fruit. Another swung a chainsword. He caught the blade, wrenched it free, and tore through three more with the same motion. Blood hissed as it struck his armor, the air filled with ozone and terror. He moved like a ritual, each kill a syllable in a language older than the warp. The chaplain arrived last, draped in bone and scripture, Crozius crackling with holy fire. He shouted words meant to banish daemons. By his light be purged. The blow landed against the Slayer's chestplate, sparks showering. The Doomslayer looked at him, eyes hidden behind the cracked visor, and for a heartbeat, The chaplain saw not a daemon, nor a man, but the embodiment of purpose. The Slayer's hand closed around the Crozius. Metal screamed, divine energy sputtered, then silence. When it was over, the field was quiet again. Bodies lay like offerings around a new altar, the crater where he stood, bathed in the glow of burning promethium. The bell had stopped. The storm above paused, as though even the warp held its breath. He looked at the sky. 1,000 screaming souls drifted through the clouds, the warp watching, judging, learning. He could feel their curiosity, their hunger pressing against his armor. They wanted to understand him, to name him, to fold him into their tapestry of madness. But the Doomslayer had no name that the warp could claim. He was movement. He was denial. He was what existed when gods failed. He walked again. Each step echoed in eternity. Behind him, the dead began to twitch their souls, caught in the gravity of his presence, unable to leave. Somewhere in the warp, Khorne stirred. A new note of interest, a growl of approval, rippled through the chaos beyond time. A killer without worship, the blood god whispered. My kind of heretic. But the Slayer did not hear. He only heard the rhythm inside his chest, a rhythm older than prayer, older than sin. The rhythm of war itself. He descended from the ridge into the valley of silence, where even the light refused to follow. His armor dripped red, his shadow stretched impossibly long, and in that darkness, amid the smell of burnt metal and sanctified blood, the universe itself seemed to exhale as if it knew that something terrible had arrived, something that even its gods would soon learn to fear. There are no prayers in the void, only echoes, and the sound of his boots against the bones of a dying world. The fires had not yet died when the Imperium came for him. Hours, or perhaps minutes, passed. Time was a fragile thing in this place, distorted by the warp storms above. The air shimmered with invisible pressure, each breath a whisper from beyond the veil. The Doomslayer stood among corpses that steamed in the cold wind, his armor scorched and dented, his gauntlets dripping with blood that wasn't his. Around him, silence reigned. But silence was never empty in the 41st millennium. It was simply the sound of fear holding its breath. Far away, the thunder of engines approached, massive tracks grinding through ash. A column of tanks and armored transports crawled across the horizon, marked with the double-headed Aquila, the sigil of the Imperium of man. At their head, banners of gold and black flapped in the storm wind, their fabrics stiff with soot and dried blood. Servo skulls drifted above them, recording, whispering catechisms of surveillance to unseen masters. The Slayer turned his gaze toward them. The faint hum of the Praetor suit pulsed in his ears, the rhythmic beat of his own unholy heartbeat synchronizing with its systems. Broken, but alive, always alive. From the largest tank, a vox speaker crackled. Unidentified entity, you stand in violation of Imperial law. By order of the Ordo Hereticus, you will submit to purification. He said nothing. This is your final warning. Kneel, abomination, or be reduced to sanctified dust. The words meant nothing to him. Kneel to whom? To what? He had bent the knee once, to his own purpose, and shattered every chain that followed. The vox hissed again. Then came the order. Fire. The world erupted. Dozens of Lehman Russ tanks spat streams of light and thunder. Battle cannons roared. Autocannons screamed. Lasfire lanced across the plain. The ground itself convulsed as shells struck, exploding into waves of molten dirt and steel. When the smoke cleared, the Doomslayer still stood. His armor was cracked open at the side, blackened by the heat. Fragments of sanctified shrapnel embedded in his shoulder. He turned his head slightly, the motion slow, deliberate. Through the cracked visor, a single gleam of green light burned. Then he moved. He ran, no, he charged, faster than any mortal eye could follow. The earth broke beneath each step. A shell struck his chest. He ignored it. He slammed his fist into the hull of the nearest tank. The metal crumpled like wax. Another blow, and the turret tore free, tumbling across the field. Panic spread like wildfire. It's still alive. Saints preserve us. Fall back. Fall back. The Doomslayer leapt onto the tank, pried open its hatch, and tore the gunner from within, a screaming man wrapped in prayer scrolls and metal. The Slayer crushed him against the armor plate, his blood painting the Aquila in blasphemous crimson. He did not look at what he killed. He never had. Each act of violence was a continuation of a single eternal sentence. There shall be no mercy. A squad of Tempestus Scions opened fire, their hellguns crackling with superheated fury. Bolts of plasma scorched his armor, carving glowing trenches across his chestplate. He turned to them. For a heartbeat, they saw something in that cracked visor, not eyes, but reflections of every demon he had ever slain. And they faltered. That was all it took. He was upon them. One he split in half with his own rifle. Another he impaled on a broken antenna, lifting him into the storm. The last tried to run. The Slayer hurled a fragment of his armor through the man's spine. A burning hymn rolled over the battlefield. Through the dust, a new figure emerged, towering, robed in gold-trimmed armor, his helm carved in the likeness of a skull. A chaplain, again, but not like the last. This one was chosen. His crozius shimmered with blue fire, the weapon humming with the resonance of the Emperor's name. "Demon," the chaplain bellowed, his voice carried by vox amplifiers that shook the air. "You tread upon sacred ground. By the God Emperor's wrath, I shall cleanse you." The Doom Slayer turned slowly to face him. The faint crackle of his visor reflected the chaplain's flame. The chaplain struck first. The Crozius came down like judgment itself, slamming into the Slayer's forearm. Bone shattered, sparks flew, but the Doom Slayer did not yield. He countered, grabbed the chaplain's arm, and drove his own shattered gauntlet into the priest's chest, again and again, until the ceramite gave way. The chaplain fell to his knees, blood bubbling through the grill of his helm. "You are no demon," he rasped. "Then, what are you?" The Doom Slayer did not answer. He simply took the crozius from the dying man's hand. The weapon hissed, glowing in his grip, as if protesting its new master. But even the machine's spirit seemed to understand resistance was pointless. He dropped it. The storm began to calm. The last echoes of battle faded into the hollow wind. Only the rhythmic beat of the Slayer's breath remained, and the sound of distant chanting and orbital transmission, perhaps calling for an inquisitorial strike. He turned his gaze upward. The clouds parted just enough to reveal the faint outline of a starship in low orbit, black and vast, covered in Gothic spires and weapon arrays like cathedrals carved into night. Even from the surface, he could feel its gaze, machine spirits, sensors, and 1,000 terrified souls staring down at the thing that had survived. They would come. They always came. He began to walk toward the light of the burning tanks, the wreckage of faith. Around him, the ground trembled, not from explosions but from something deeper, the warp itself reacting to his existence. Invisible shapes moved at the edge of perception. Faces in smoke, hands in the dust. The Slayer ignored them. But the warp did not ignore him. In the swirling sky, the shadow of a skull formed vast and horned. A voice that was not sound slid through reality, a whisper that turned every atom to ice. "A killer without devotion," it mused. "A heretic without God. You will serve me." The Slayer raised his head, his fist clenched. He stepped forward, and the vision shattered like glass. The warp recoiled, shrieking as if burned by his defiance. Silence fell again. The wind carried ash across the battlefield, weaving it into drifting halos around his armor. And then, for the first time since his arrival, the Doomslayer spoke not in words, but in motion. He looked at the ruined insignia of the Imperium beneath his boots. The shattered aquila split in two. He pressed his gauntlet into the dust, leaving a mark deeper than stone. A single motion. A single message. He would not kneel. The distant thunder of a dropship echoed from above. The Inquisition was coming. The Slayer lifted his head, the crack in his visor gleaming with the fire of a dying world. And as he walked into the storm once more, the sky itself seemed to flinch. For in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. And he was its purest echo. Darkness. But not the gentle kind. This was the kind that listened. Metal scraped against metal. Incense thickened the air like smoke from dying gods. The Doomslayer lay on an altar of brass, chained by sigils that glowed with red scripture prayers carved not in ink, but in blood and electricity. Above him hung a figure tall, spindly, more machine than man. 1,000 mechadendrites writhed behind its back, whispering binary litanies into the void. Tubes fed oil and holy fluids into its ribs. The smell was rot and ozone, sanctified decay. The Magos Mechanicus watched through lenses the size of skulls. His voice was a glitching choir. Subject, anomalous. Bioform not recognized. Machine pattern impure. Flesh resistant to divine augmentation. A servo skull hovered near the altar, recording. Its metallic eye clicked, engraving each blasphemy into data script. The Magos reached forward. A limb of chrome extended, tipped with a blade that hummed with electricity. It slid across the Slayer's armor, cutting deep into the Praetor plate, exposing the scarred flesh beneath. Steam hissed. Curious, the Magos whispered. Muscle tissue regenerates despite no cybernetic implant. Neural patterns, chaotic, yet rhythmic. Like a prayer, the blade moved again, this time toward the Slayer's head. The moment it touched the cracked visor, his eyes opened. Green, burning, ancient. The Magos froze mid-motion. Something in that gaze, even through reinforced glass, reached through the machine god's logic and tore the soul beneath. For the first time in centuries, the Magos felt fear. Then came the motion. Chains broke, screams followed. The Doom Slayer rose, tearing through servo wires like cobwebs. Electricity coursed over his armor, dancing like spectral fire. The altar split in two beneath his fists. The servo skull tried to flee. He caught it, crushed it, and hurled its remains into the Magos' chest. The Magos staggered back, circuits sparking, machine oil dripping like blood. His mechadendrites lashed out, impaling the Slayer's shoulder. The air filled with machine chant. The flesh is weak. The Slayer gripped the metallic tendril and ripped it free. Then weakness dies. He growled his first words since arriving in this cursed galaxy. He hurled the cable like a whip, slicing through two servitors that lumbered forward with surgical saws for arms. Their bodies convulsed as internal fluids sprayed against the walls. Sparks lit the chamber like candles in a nightmare chapel. The Magos shrieked binary madness, unleashing volleys of plasma from his internal cannons. The energy burned holes through the altar, melting the steel floor beneath. The Doomslayer endured it, body burning, armor melting, but unbroken. He advanced through the storm of light, each step punctuated by the sound of breaking steel. You cannot exist. The Magos stuttered, retreating. You defy both organic law and divine code. What are you, creature? The Slayer didn't answer. He reached him. His hand slammed through the Magos' chest, pulling out a writhing mass of cables and synthetic organs. Sparks and sacred blood showered the altar. The Magos collapsed, the metallic hymn of the Mechanicus dying in static gasps. The chamber fell still. All that remained was the sound of cooling metal and the steady rhythm of his breathing. He looked down at himself. His armor was torn open, flesh burned and fused with steel. Wires from the Mechanicus's machines still clung to his body, half melted into the Praetor suit. They pulsed faintly, like veins of forbidden life. He flexed his hand. Sparks leapt from his knuckles. The fusion of machine and flesh imperfect, painful but functional. The Mechanicus had tried to dissect him. Instead, they had upgraded him. He turned toward the door. Behind it, more movement. A dozen voices chanting, "Praise the Omnissiah, cleanse the abomination." The door burst inward. Red-robed Skitarii poured in, rifles raised, sensors glowing crimson. Their metallic limbs clicked in ritual unison, their faces hidden by augmetic masks. They opened fire. Bolter rounds screamed through the temple. Flames and shrapnel consumed the altar. When the smoke cleared, the Slayer was gone. One Skitarii looked around. Scanning. Target lost. Machine spirits indicate. The wall behind him exploded. The Slayer erupted through, grabbing him by the throat. A single motion snapped the steel vertebrae in half. Before the others could react, the Slayer ripped a weapon from one of their arms, a phosphor blaster, and turned it on them. Bright green fire lit the forge like dawn on a dead world. The air turned molten. Servitors collapsed in heaps of twisted circuitry. The Magos' corpse still hung on the altar, his data tethers twitching like dying worms. When the last body fell, the Slayer stood alone once more. Smoke curled around him. The mechanical hymns had ended. In their place, A new sound rose soft, distant, but unmistakable. The low thunder of ships descending. Through the shattered archway above, he could see the sky crimson, flickering with orbital bombardment. The Imperium was coming again. He stared upward at the fire falling from the heavens. For a moment, he stood still, framed by the burning cathedral. He was neither man nor daemon now, but something caught between. Machine cables pulsed in his armor like veins. Blood and oil mingled in perfect symmetry. He remembered the words the Magos had spoken. Like a prayer. Perhaps he was a prayer, he thought, but one that gods would never answer. A new voice reached him through the smoke, harsh, human, commanding. Stand down. He turned. A figure in black carapace armor stepped through the broken doorway, flanked by stormtroopers with Aquila sigils engraved on their helms. His face was pale, eyes cold and burning with suspicion. The inquisitorial eye glimmered on his chest. You, the man said, leveling his plasma pistol. You slaughter the servants of the Omnissiah. You defy the Emperor's law. Identify yourself. The Doomslayer tilted his head, silent. Speak, creature. Do you serve the Emperor or the Warp? A pause. The Slayer stepped closer. One boot, then another. The Inquisitor's finger tightened on the trigger. The pistol hummed, charging. The Slayer stopped an arm's length away. I serve no one, he said. His voice was gravel and thunder, ancient and final. The Inquisitor fired. The bolt hit him square in the chest. The Slayer staggered, smoke rising from the impact. Then, without a word, he drove his fist into the man's helmet, caving it in like soft clay. The soldiers screamed and opened fire. The scene devolved into pure chaos, muzzle flashes cutting through the haze, fragments of cogitator glass raining down from the ceiling. The Slayer tore through them like a machine of judgment. When it ended, the temple was unrecognizable, a ruin of fire and melted steel. Bodies of priests and inquisitorial agents alike scattered among shattered relics of faith. He stood at the center, lit by the reflection of holy fire. All around him, broken augmetics sparked like dying stars. In the far corner, a single servo altar remained half-functional. On its flickering hololith, a prayer glowed weakly. Omnissiah, guide the hand that destroys, for destruction too is divine. He stared at the words. For a brief instant, something like understanding or perhaps amusement crossed his expressionless face. Then he turned and walked into the storm, leaving behind a trail of ruin and the echo of dying prayers. The air aboard the inquisitorial vessel was cold, so cold that even metal seemed to shiver. Doomslayer sat chained in a throne of restraint, his armor stripped and scattered across the obsidian floor. The room was a cathedral without faith, stone vaults carved with Aquilas and screaming angels, the walls alive with candlelight and servo skulls. Incense and ozone filled the void like breath in a tomb. At the far end stood the Inquisitor. His robes were black trimmed with red, and a rosette of the holy ordos gleamed at his throat. His eyes were not eyes, they were augmetic lenses, scanning the Slayer's every twitch, every pulse, every blasphemy of existence. You, he began, voice soft, deliberate. You walked through the fire of Mars and left none standing. You slew the servants of the Omnissiah, defied Mechanicus law, and survived weapons that would atomize tanks. You are not human. Silence. Are you demon? Still silence. The Inquisitor clasped his hands behind his back, pacing slowly. The light from the candles fractured across the lenses of his eyes like tiny, dying suns. The Ecclesiarchy whispers that you are punishment made flesh. The Mechanicus calls you an error. The Ordo Malleus fears you are something worse, a neutrality, in a war that allows no middle ground. He turned sharply. So I will ask again, whom do you serve? The Doomslayer looked up. His face was shadow, his body marked by scars that had never healed. His voice, when it came, sounded like thunder echoing through a crypt. I serve the end of monsters. The Inquisitor's expression did not change. Then you serve the Emperor, whether you wish it or not. He gestured. A servo skull floated forward, projecting hololithic images into the air. Battlefields, daemons, entire regiments consumed by warp fire. These, the Inquisitor said, are the fruits of chaos. They are why we burn worlds, why we sacrifice billions. Do you understand? The Slayer's gaze did not waver. His mind flickered back, not to this galaxy, but to another. To hells he had already broken. He remembered the screams of demons torn apart by his hands. Different universe. Same hunger. The Inquisitor watched him for a moment longer, then leaned closer, his tone shifting colder, reverent. There are whispers among my order that you might be a weapon. A relic cast into our reality for a purpose. If so, he said, stepping closer still, then I must know whose purpose. A flicker. The lights dimmed. The candles trembled. The air rippled with unseen static, the subtle, nauseating distortion of the warp pressing against the edges of the real. The Inquisitor froze. So did the acolytes. Their breath turned to mist. The warp was watching. And through that spectral membrane came laughter, not sound, but pressure, thick and hot as blood. Shadows crawled across the walls, taking shapes with too many limbs, too many eyes. The hololiths crackled into nonsense sigils. He is mine, a voice said, deep and vast, vibrating through the metal bones of the ship. The Inquisitor drew his sword, a relic that hummed with psychic wards. Khorne, he hissed. Begone. The Doomslayer raised his head slowly. The voice rolled through the chamber again, now laced with mockery and wrath. He kills without faith. He kills without offering. He kills because the killing is truth. He belongs to me. Bolts of crimson lightning tore through the air. Servo skulls exploded, raining fire and shrapnel. Acolytes screamed prayers, clutching relics to their chests. But the Slayer stood. The chains binding him glowed red hot, then shattered. He stepped down from the dais. The Inquisitor turned to him, eyes wide, sword raised. Contain him. Psychers knelt in unison, chanting wards. Psychic light flooded the chamber, but Doomslayer walked through it, untouched. The energy bent around him, unable to touch what had no place in the warp's design. He moved toward the shadows, forming at the far end of the hall, a massive, horned figure emerging from the distortion, half real, half dream. The air screamed around it. Khorne's aspect, a vision of brass and blood, towered over the mortals. Take the gift, mortal, it thundered. Take my mark, and be the blade of my eternity. The Slayer stopped within arm's reach. The candles flickered out. Then, slowly, deliberately, he raised his hand and showed the middle finger. The entity's roar split the ship in half. Walls fractured. Flames poured through the altar vents. A psychic shockwave hurled everyone to the ground. The Inquisitor's wards shattered like glass. The apparition collapsed into a storm of ash, its bellow fading into laughter that shook the hull. When the light returned, the chamber was wreckage. The Doomslayer stood alone in the center, smoke rising from his armor, eyes burning with viridian light. Around him lay the broken forms of psychers and acolytes, their minds seared beyond recognition. The Inquisitor crawled toward him, his arm bleeding, his once perfect robe scorched. You cannot defy. The Slayer knelt beside him. I don't defy, he said. I end. The Inquisitor looked into his eyes and saw the truth, not daemon, not man, not servant, something worse, a will so pure that even chaos could not corrupt it. The Slayer rose. The ship groaned under its own gravity well as reality tried to reject what he had become. He turned toward the great stained glass viewport at the far end of the hall. Beyond it stretched the stars, infinite, cruel, godless. A single planet gleamed below, its surface scarred with the light of war. Without hesitation, he walked to the window, pressed his bloodied hand to it. The glass cracked, then shattered. Vacuum roared through the chamber. Acolytes were pulled screaming into the void. The Inquisitor vanished into darkness, but the Doomslayer did not fall. The warp reached for him again, tendrils of reality twisting, trying to drag him back into its eternal hunger. He resisted, muscles tearing, veins alight with blue fire. The void howled around him, then silence. He stood on the outer hull of the ship, stars reflecting in the broken glass behind him. His body was bleeding, his armor scorched black, but he stood. Through the psychic ether, he heard a whisper 1,000 voices across time and faith. Some called him heretic, others salvation. He looked into the abyss and spoke not loudly, but with the weight of eternity behind every word. Your gods bleed. Then he leapt, downward, toward the world below, toward the endless war waiting for him. The warp screamed his name as he fell, a name it did not understand, a name it could not own. And when he struck the surface again, the world shook. The crusade to purge him began. But even the Imperium would learn, in time, that the Doomslayer could not be purged, for he was not a daemon, not a saint, not even a man. He was retribution made flesh. The warp opened like a wound in the heavens. No sound, no light, only the red. A storm of brass and ash tore across the void, swallowing the sky of the dying world below. Where Doomslayer had stood, reality broke, and the universe screamed. The planet convulsed, mountains collapsing into the sea as the warp bled into matter, and in the heart of that bleeding sky, the Slayer fell once more. He hit the ground with the weight of a meteor. Soil boiled. Rivers turned to blood. The sky above burned scarlet as if made from living flesh. He rose to his feet slowly. The landscape stretched before him, endless plains of skulls, towers of bone, rivers of arterial fire. The air was music, the rhythm of war drums struck by the fists of gods. He was not on any world. He was in Khorne's realm, the throne domain of unending battle, where every drop of blood ever shed sang in the same eternal chorus. The Slayer took a breath, tasting iron and thunder. Behind him, shadows moved, thousands of them. Warriors of brass and rage, their bodies carved from the bones of conquerors, their weapons forged in the furnace of hate. The blood legions of Khorne had come to greet the intruder. They spoke no words. Khorne's domain had no need for language. Only challenge. The first wave charged. Axes and chain blades shrieked through the air. Doomslayer met them head-on. His fists crushed armor, his boots shattered skulls. A daemon lunged. He tore its jaw off. Another swung a glaive. He broke its arm and drove the weapon through its heart. The battle was not fought, it was unleashed. Every motion was violence perfected. Every breath was fury sanctified. His armor cracked, his skin burned, but the rhythm never faltered. The tide of blood grew higher. Still he fought. From above, the blood god watched. A figure vast as mountains, sitting upon a throne built of skulls, skulls of gods, saints, angels, demons, and men alike. His skin was brass, his eyes burning coals. In one hand he held an axe large enough to split worlds. In the other, the chain of an entire galaxy. Khorne leaned forward. He did not smile, Khorne never smiled. But there was hunger in his gaze. "A mortal who kills like a god," he said, his voice shaking the bones of the dead. "And yet, he does not pray." The Slayer felt the words rather than heard them. They vibrated through the warp, through his flesh, through the endless chorus of slaughter around him. More daemons came, blood letters with jagged horns and tongues of flame. They swarmed him in the thousands. He fought until the rivers turned solid with corpses. When his arms could swing no longer, he tore the spine from a daemon and wielded it as a whip. When his armor failed, he fought bare-handed. When his blood ran dry, he fought with rage alone. Still, he did not kneel. The sky cracked open. From the red storm descended Khorne, the hound of Khorne, a beast with 3 heads, each speaking in the language of wrath. It lunged. The impact hurled him across the battlefield. Its claws tore through flesh and armor. He rolled, broken, his vision swimming. The world pulsed to the rhythm of a great drum, the heartbeat of the god who ruled it. The beast leapt again. He caught its jaws mid-air. For a moment, they struggled, titan against beast, God's champion against God's heretic. Then the Doomslayer's arms snapped forward, breaking its neck in 3 directions at once. The plain fell silent. Even the storm paused. Then the voice came again, vast and echoing, every word a mountain collapsing. Enough. The battlefield parted. Rivers withdrew. The sky bent downward, becoming the gaze of the god himself. A single drop of molten blood fell from the throne above and struck the ground. It hit like a bomb. When the smoke cleared, Khorne stood before him, towering, impossible, radiating raw violence made manifest. "You enter my domain and drown it in silence," Khorne rumbled. "You kill my sons without tribute. You offer no prayer, no curse, no name. What are you?" The Doomslayer said nothing. He looked up, the green of his eyes burning through the haze of red. "Speak," Khorne demanded. Still nothing. The god took a step forward. Each step crushed miles of skulls into powder. Every being that kills does so for me, whether they know it or not. Rage is mine, blood is mine, death is mine. The Slayer's hand tightened around his broken gauntlet. Not mine, he said. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the warp seemed to hesitate. Khorne tilted his head, the faintest tremor running through the blood that composed his throne. Then fight. The axe descended. It struck the ground with such force that reality tore open not space, but meaning. The impact unleashed a sea of fire, waves of molten metal, storms of skulls. The Slayer vanished beneath it. But then he rose. Through the inferno, through the hurricane of blades, through the judgment of a god. His armor glowed white-hot, his flesh burned, his bones cracked, but his will remained. He caught the axe with both hands. The shockwave obliterated the plain. For a moment, god and mortal were locked in struggle. Khorne, eternal. The Slayer, unyielding. The god leaned closer, his voice now a snarl that split galaxies. You cannot win. You have no soul to sacrifice, no faith to anchor you. The Slayer stared into the god's eyes, into eternity's furnace, and whispered, I don't win, I end. With a roar that shook the warp, he drove the axe upward. For an instant, the impossible happened. Divine metal met defiance, and the weapon splintered. Shards of godsteel rained across the battlefield. Khorne reeled, not wounded, but surprised. He looked down at the mortal before him, burned, broken, breathing fire. And he laughed, a sound like collapsing worlds. You will not serve me, Khorne said, but I will remember you. Go, mortal. Let your fury walk this galaxy. Let it remind my priests what rage truly is. The red faded. The blood rivers stilled. The Slayer blinked and the warp fell away like a dying dream. He stood once again on solid ground, a ruined world beneath a dying sun. Around him lay the remnants of a battlefield he did not remember entering. The dust smelled of ash and fear. He looked at his hands. The burns were gone. The armor reforged, but darker, heavier. Across his gauntlet, etched in blood and iron, was a single sigil, a broken rune of Khorne, shattered in defiance. He flexed his hand. The rune cracked, and the metal whispered. Above him, thunder rolled faint, but approving. He had refused a god, and still lived. The warp did not forget him. When Khorne's laughter faded into silence, the galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath. For a time, days, hours, or centuries, Doomslayer walked in solitude. Each step echoed across broken ground, through worlds too ruined to name. His armor was blackened, his shadow stretched unnaturally long. The sigil of the blood god, cracked and burned into his gauntlet, pulsed like a dying heart. He had no destination, only motion. But in the grim darkness of the far future, stillness is never empty. The warp watches all things that move, and what it cannot claim, it seeks to understand. The change came without warning. One blink a field of ash, the next a cathedral of light. The ground beneath him shimmered, rippling like liquid glass. The air was blue and gold, alive with fractal shapes that folded into themselves. Voices whispered in 100 languages, each one his own. He stood in a place that wasn't. Welcome, Slayer of the unknowable, a voice said, smooth as mercury. He turned. From the endless geometry stepped a figure draped in silk and shadow. No face, only the shifting mask of something that refused definition. Eyes blinked in impossible places. Its form changed as it spoke at once, man, woman, serpent, and storm. You have met rage, the voice continued. You have refused devotion. You have rejected eternity. And yet, it tilted its head. You still walk. Even gods would be unmade by what you have endured. Doomslayer said nothing. He took a step forward. The ground rippled, bending reality around his motion. I am not your enemy, the figure said. I am curiosity. The word itself warped the air, creating echoes that repeated into infinity. Khorne roars and burns. The being continued. He is a blunt instrument, a hammer. But I. The mask changed again, now smooth, serene, impossibly human. I asked the questions. It circled him like smoke around a flame. What fuels you, Doomslayer? Rage? Justice? Faith? Silence? No, not faith. You're empty of prayer. Then what keeps the fire lit when the body should die? The Slayer's eyes burned beneath the visor. The work isn't done. The entity laughed 1,000 tones at once, from angelic choirs to mechanical shrieks. The work? Ah, yes, the mortal illusion of completion. You mistake momentum for purpose. The space around them shifted. The cathedral of light dissolved into something else, a memory. The Slayer's memory. He stood again on Mars. Red dust, sirens, the UAC compound in flames, voices screaming. He saw himself a man, unarmored, human, dragging a broken rifle through the ruins, and behind him, the first demon he ever killed. The being stood beside him now, cloaked in gold smoke. See how small it was? One moment, one world. Yet you made it your eternity. He stepped forward, and the illusion changed again. Earth, then hell, then something older, a battlefield beneath alien stars, where soldiers bearing the Aquila burned cities in the Emperor's name. You fight across realities, the voice murmured. Different gods, same lies. You could end them all. Every god, every demon, every emperor. The figure extended a hand. Serve me, and I shall show you how. For a moment, the air stilled. The Slayer looked at the hand, graceful, luminous, infinite. Within its palm unfolded visions. Worlds healed, wars silenced, creation rebalanced. The very fabric of reality rewritten to remove the need for suffering. A world without demons. A world without gods. And for the briefest fraction of a second, he hesitated. The being smiled. Its form began to stabilize, becoming something beautiful, human, almost kind. You have carried anger for so long that you mistake it for breath, it whispered. Lay it down, let me end your war. But the Slayer knew beauty when it lied. He reached out, not to accept, but to grip. His gauntlet closed around the figure's wrist. The illusion shattered. The being screamed, its form unraveling into shards of light and madness. For an instant, the universe around them peeled back, revealing the raw infinity beneath the churning veins of the warp, the faces of souls screaming in equations of endless death. The Slayer's voice cut through the storm like iron through silk. I don't end the war, he said. I am the war. He pulled the creature forward and drove his fist through its chest. The world exploded. Light, sound, thought all gone. Only static, only violence. The very symbols that defined existence bent and screamed as Doomslayer tore the embodiment of change apart with his hands. When the storm subsided, he stood alone again, though stood was the wrong word. There was no ground here, no sky, only a void of glass and thought. Fragments of the being floated around him, whispering, You cannot kill. What becomes? All endings are beginnings. He looked at the fragments and crushed one in his hand. It dissolved into dust, reforming instantly behind him, whispering again, You cannot. He turned, faster than sound, and the echo stopped. Then stillness, a single shape reformed before him. The mask, cracked, bleeding light. Its voice now faint, pleading, You cannot resist forever. You will tire. You will fall. Even rage decays. The Slayer stepped forward. His silhouette loomed against the dying light of the god's remains. Then let me decay last. He struck. The warp convulsed and Tzeentch screamed. The sound echoed through eternity. For a moment, the architect of fate, the god who had never been defeated, who was the concept of change, faltered. Its patterns broke, its logic failed, and in that crack of infinity, Doomslayer tore his way out of the warp itself. He fell once more through the dimensions, through the lattice of time, through 1,000 histories collapsing into one. When he landed, the world beneath him was silent, a dead city, towers of stone and steel reaching toward a sunless sky. He stood, smoke rising from his armor. The rune of Khorne had burned away. The mark of Tzeentch never appeared. For the first time, his armor bore no sigil, no trace of god or man, only ash. Above him, the air rippled. The warp itself withdrew. It had learned fear, and somewhere deep within that cosmic silence, the other gods whispered. He walks still, unbound, unclaimed. The Doomslayer looked to the horizon. The wind carried the scent of oil and fire machines. The Imperium awaited, its cathedrals armed, its faith ready to consume him once more. He started walking. No words, No prayers, only motion. The call went out across 1,000 systems. A single order, transmitted on encrypted vox bands, carried in the tongues of every priest and admiral of the Imperium. Exterminatus, not of a planet, but of a man. The world of Wrath Veritas became the stage. Once a shrine world, it was now an open wound of ash and scripture. The Doom Slayer stood at its center, where statues of the Emperor had been toppled and melted into the earth. Above him, the skies burned. Fleets orbited in formation, cathedrals of steel, their hulls carved with psalms and prayers, their weapons blessed with holy unction. He watched in silence as the first bombardment began. Fire rained from heaven. Orbital lances split the horizon. Cities vaporized, oceans boiled, the planet screamed. And still he stood. When the smoke cleared, there was only glass and obsidian plain that stretched to every horizon. In its center, a single figure walked through the flame. In the upper command sanctum of the battleship Saint Illumina, Inquisitor Lord Varant stared at the augur displays in disbelief. "No life should remain," he whispered. A servitor hissed binary data. "Biometric anomaly persists. Subject moving toward northern bombardment line." Varant slammed his fist against the console. "Deploy ground assets. All of them." Below, thunderhawks screamed through the atmosphere. The Adeptus Astartes descended, hundreds of them, armor gleaming with holy oil, purity seals flapping like banners of judgment. The Grey Knights followed, each warrior a psychic fortress, their minds burning with the Emperor's light. They formed a circle around the crater. At its heart stood Doomslayer, armor scorched black, visor cracked, the edges of his body glowing faintly from warp burns that refused to heal. The very ground pulsed with each of his breaths. The first to speak was a Grey Knight captain, his halberd wreathed in psychic flame. "Kneel, heretic," he intoned. "Your defiance offends both man and God." The Slayer looked at them, his silence heavier than any sermon. "Do you know what you face?" another shouted. "We are the sons of Titan. We have banished daemons older than stars." The Slayer moved. A blur, then impact. The first Space Marine went flying, his armor crumpling as if made of wax. The line broke. Bolt of fire roared. Psychic lances flared. The battlefield became apocalypse. The Doom Slayer waded through the storm like a walking cataclysm. Bolter shells exploded against him, dismembering ceramite and flesh alike his and theirs, indistinguishable in the carnage. He tore a Grey Knight from his armor, crushed his helm, and hurled the body into a rhino transport, detonating it in holy fire. The Marines fought valiantly, reciting the Emperor's catechism as they died. Pain is faith, pain is proof. Their proof scattered in red vapor. Even the Psychers faltered. Their powers bent around him, nullified not by technology or sorcery, but by something far simpler: refusal. He was not immune to the warp. The warp was immune to him. There was nothing within to grasp. No faith, no fear, only momentum. From orbit, the commanders watched in horrified reverence. "He fights like the Primarchs of legend," murmured a tech adept. "No," said Varant quietly. "He fights like the Emperor before he remembered mercy." The Grey Knights changed tactics. They formed a psychic circle, voices merging in unison. By the Emperor's light, by the soul of humanity, by terror itself, reality bent. A column of silver fire descended, engulfing the crater. The chant became unbearable, the ground disintegrated. For a moment, all was white. When the light faded, the circle was empty. Then footsteps. He walked out of the crater, smoke rising from his armor, blood hissing on the molten ground. One eye glowed green, the other burned dull red. The halberd of a Grey Knight jutted from his shoulder. He tore it free and flung it aside. Even the storm paused to listen. He looked at the ring of survivors, dozens now, not hundreds, and spoke. His voice low and absolute. "Your faith is louder than your fear." A pause. "That's why it breaks first." He moved again. The remaining Marines charged, knowing it was death, choosing it anyway. They died singing the Emperor's name. He killed them gently, if such a word could exist here, swift, precise, almost merciful. When the last fell, the field was quiet. Only the flames of their purity seals fluttered in the hot wind, like prayers dissolving into ash. Above, in the fleet's sanctum, The Inquisitor gave his final order, "Bring the Titans," and so the ground shook. The sky darkened as the Legio Invicta descended, god machines walking upon the bones of a world. Warlord Titans, Reavers, Warhounds, entire mountain ranges of steel and sanctity. Their arrival was a hymn. Each footstep was a sermon. The lead Titan's vox thundered. "By the decree of the Omnissiah and the High Lords of Terror, you are sentenced to obliteration." The Doomslayer looked up. For the first time, he seemed small. Then the Titans opened fire. Volcano cannons roared, plasma annihilated the horizon, laser destructors carved chasms through continents. The atmosphere ignited, mountains vanished, oceans turned to steam. No one could have survived. But amidst the inferno, one Titan faltered. Its sensors glitched, machine spirits howled in confusion. Then impact. From beneath its own shadow, the Doomslayer rose, gripping a fallen weapon the size of a shuttle, one of the Titan's plasma conduits torn free. He swung it like a hammer, striking the machine's knee. Metal screamed. The Warlord toppled, crashing into its brethren, detonating their reactors in a chain of nuclear fire. The blast consumed the battlefield. When the smoke lifted, half the Titan Legion lay crippled. The Doomslayer stood at the center, armor broken, one arm hanging by threads of muscle and steel. He looked up at the heavens, at the Black Fleet still burning in orbit. The vox of the Saint Illumina opened one last channel. Varan's voice trembled but held. "You are not man, you are not daemon, you are a disease upon both." The Slayer raised his gaze to the ship, a speck of light among burning clouds. "Then I am the cure." He tore the reactor core from the fallen Titan and hurled it skyward. The heavens answered with light. The explosion consumed the upper atmosphere, tearing through orbiting vessels like paper lanterns. Debris fell like meteor showers, baptizing the planet in holy ruin. Hours or years later, the fires died. What remained of Rath Veritas was a hollow shell, a world of glass. No survivors, no fleet, no signal. In the dead silence, a single figure emerged from beneath the ruins. His armor was fused to his flesh. His body was smoke and steel. His steps carved trenches into the molten ground. He looked up at the stars through the veil of dust. The Imperium had thrown its full might, its faith, its fury, and failed. The galaxy would whisper of this day. The day faith met its reflection and cracked. He began to walk again, leaving behind the wreckage of titans and angels. Each step echoed the dying rhythm of 1,000 sermons. Above, in the deep warp where gods watched, a voice muttered in uneasy amusement. He bleeds, yet does not fall. He fights, yet serves none. He is entropy given form. And far away, even Khorne's laughter had grown quiet. The planet no longer existed. Only the echo of its death remained, an ember of molten rock drifting through the void, haloed by the dust of its own annihilation. Among that drifting ruin, something moved. He emerged from the fire, not alive, not dead, merely present. The Doomslayer stepped onto a fragment of glass that had once been ground, the stars reflecting in the cracks beneath his boots. The heat should have burned him to vapor. The radiation should have erased him from history. But history no longer recognized him. Across the void, the warp stirred. The fall of Rath Veritas had not gone unnoticed. Billions of souls screamed prayers into the dark, begging their gods for meaning. The Imperium called it heresy. The Ecclesiarchy called it omen. The Chaos gods called it curiosity. "He lives," whispered Slaanesh, voice of silk and sorrow. "He defies," growled Khorne, grinding galaxies in his teeth. "He teaches," mused Tzeentch, still wounded where no god should bleed. "He reminds," Nurgle chuckled, his laughter the sound of dying stars. Even decay must fear something, and for the first time in eternity, the gods agreed, if only in silence. In the cold blackness between stars, the Slayer walked. There was no ship, no light, only the faint hum of the void pressing against the edges of his armor. Yet he breathed. With every step, fragments of the warp clung to him, memories of angels, screams of planets, echoes of prayers. They spun around him like a slow orbit, whispering his name in tongues that had never been invented. He had become a paradox in motion. a being without allegiance, faith, or end. Even the warp, that infinite sea of chaos and emotion, could find no place for him. It recoiled, like a body rejecting its own infection. Then, the vision came. At first it was faint, a shimmer on the horizon of unreality. Then, it grew. Shapes formed, voices gathered. The emptiness itself coalesced into structure. Before him stood a door, not of matter, but of understanding. It pulsed faintly, built from the souls of those he had slain, human and daemon alike woven into a single tapestry of light and agony. Behind it, the warp roared, infinite and hungry. He understood immediately. The warp was calling him home, not as a servant, not as an enemy, but as something it could no longer define. He approached. The ground beneath him shifted between steel and bone and flame. Reality fractured with every step. When he placed his hand upon the door, it did not open. It remembered every death he had caused, every scream, every prayer unanswered. They surged through him in an instant, trillions of voices begging for peace, vengeance, salvation, understanding. For the first time, Doomslayer felt the sum of his own war, and yet he did not stop. Beyond the door, the warp waited. It was no longer a storm of madness, but an eye vast, still, aware. He stepped through. There was no sound, no gravity, no direction, only sensation. The warp folded around him, examining him like a question it had forgotten how to answer. "You are not flesh," it whispered. "Not faith, not hate. What are you?" He said nothing. "You have killed gods. You have denied their gifts. You have stood where angels burn. Do you think yourself greater?" Still, silence. "You cannot be nothing," the warp hissed. "Nothing cannot walk." He looked out into the infinite, at the endless tides of chaos and creation, and for the first time, he spoke, not to defy, but to define. "I am what remains when belief dies." The warp trembled. Images bloomed within it, memories of empires and crusades, all built on faith, all ending in ruin. Worlds that had prayed, worlds that had screamed, all dust now, all gone. The warp showed him the Imperium collapsing under its own weight. It showed him the gods devouring themselves in endless hunger. It showed him the emptiness left when all purpose rots. And then, it showed him himself, standing alone in an empty galaxy, surrounded by the echoes of everything that once was, unkillable, unending, alone. "This is what you are," the warp said. "Entropy with eyes. Even decay dies eventually. But you do not." It paused, then spoke softly, almost afraid. "We made you." The Slayer looked up. "Then you made your end." He reached out and closed his hand around the warp's own light. The universe convulsed. The eye of terror flickered. Reality buckled, and for a heartbeat, every psyker in the galaxy screamed. The warp itself flinched, because for the first time, something inside it had stopped believing in its inevitability. He awoke on a battlefield. Grey dust, broken statues, the sound of chanting in the distance. The Imperium had rebuilt here. Or perhaps it was another world that looked the same. There was no difference anymore. The same faith, the same fear. He stood in silence, the warp's echo fading from his armor. A child approached him, a boy in tattered robes, face smeared with ash. He held a small icon of the Emperor, cracked down the middle. "Are you a saint?" the boy asked. The Slayer looked at the broken symbol. The question lingered. He could have walked away. He almost did. But instead, he knelt. Not in worship, but in acknowledgement. He took the icon, pressed it once between his hands, and handed it back. The crack in the symbol had sealed. The boy smiled, then vanished. Whether into dust or memory, he couldn't tell. The Slayer rose. The horizon glowed faintly with the light of distant war. He turned toward it and began walking. He did not know why, only that the motion was honest. Above him, the warp shifted uneasily. Below him, the ground whispered prayers in languages long dead. And across the galaxy, inquisitors, sorcerers, daemons, and saints all dreamed the same dream, of a man who could not be claimed, could not be killed, could not be named, Some said he was a daemon of balance. Others, a forgotten Primarch. Others still, the Emperor's shadow walking forever, hunting the lies of gods. But the truth had no tongue to speak it. He stopped once more, at the edge of the void, where the stars bent like candles in the wind. The silence was endless. He looked down at his hands, blood, ash, machine, light. Then he looked upward, to the galaxy still burning, and whispered, "I will not save you." He turned, "I will not destroy you." The words hung like iron in the air. "I will simply outlast you." And with that, he vanished into the dark, swallowed by the very cosmos that could no longer tell if it feared him or needed him. 1,000 years later, a Mechanicus probe recovered fragments of a blackened world, melted stone, and fused glass. Among the debris, it found a mark etched into the surface, burned into the atomic lattice itself. No script could translate it, no machine could erase it. It read simply, "Faith ends, the work does not." Thus ended the record of the being known to the Ordo Malleus as the Doomslayer. Neither heretic nor saint, neither daemon nor man. Just a scar the universe could never heal.